The expense of maintaining the fixed capital in a great society is that of maintaining the motorways, the sewage works, the schools, doctors' surgeries, hospitals, prisons, rubbish disposal, among other infrastructures. From Wealth of Nations, Book 2, Chapter 2 of Money, I quote, "The expense of maintaining the fixed capital in a great country may very properly be compared to that of repairs in a private estate. The expense of repairs may frequently be necessary for supporting the produce of the estate." End quote. I.e., the less money becomes spent upon maintaining the highways via a cost-cutting improvement, the more funds become available to spend upon doctors' wages. This is a basic elementary fact which each political party claims to be able to do better than the other within the mainstream political discussions at present. Each political party claims to have more efficient ways to maintain and implement public services and the way these are facilitated. Margaret Thatcher possibly comprehended this point Smith made almost exclusively. Margaret Thatcher was a devotee of John Maynard Keynes. She revealed this in her speech the day following the night of the Brighton bombings, 12th October 1984. The fundamental political idea which has been bandied about has been, if more efficient ways to maintain and implement public services are facilitated, then hopefully these more efficient public services will have a price tag which is less and won't be achieving less in actual service delivery. Within the following paragraph, Smith continued, "But though the whole expense of maintaining the fixed capital is thus necessarily excluded from the neat revenue of the society, it is not the same case with that of maintaining the circulating capital." End quote. Smith is saying that what is consumed is part of the neat capital, and when bridges, motorways, hospitals are maintained, there is not a consumer consuming the end product of the human labour which maintains these national infrastructures. So the expense of maintaining the fixed capital is thus necessarily excluded from the neat revenue of the society. Recall that the neat revenue comprehends How much stuff gets to where it is needed to be consumed? Smith states, and I paraphrase, the real wealth of all the inhabitants of a great country is in proportion not to their gross, but to their neat revenue. Smith defines gross revenue in the following quotation: the gross revenue of all the inhabitants of a great country comprehends the whole annual produce of their land and labour. End quote. So the gross revenue includes the neat revenue and also the production involved in the maintenance of bridges, motorways, hospitals, and their constructions. It is not measurable in terms of gross domestic product. It is measurable in tangible assets such as buildings, bridges. It is the consequences of the intelligent performance of human labour having been done. We have that the fixed capital within a great society is the motorways, the hospitals, the schools, the prisons, public buildings. Smith has told us that the maintenance of the circulating capital is not necessarily excluded from the neat revenue of the society. In the following quotations, the following diagram may help. Draw 3 circles, each representing a point in a triangle. The circles are not inside each other and don't overlap. One of these circles is set as circulating capital. An arrow leaves this circle towards another circle called maintenance upon fixed capital. Another arrow leaves circulating capital, arriving at the remaining empty circle within which you may write neat revenue equals stock reserved for immediate consumption. Now draw one big circle around the whole lot and label this outer set gross revenue of a society of a great country. As Smith continues, when he refers to this latter capital, he is referring to the circulating capital, as opposed to the fixed capital. I quote, "Of the four parts of which this latter capital is composed, money, provisions, materials, and finished work, the last three, it has already been observed, are regularly withdrawn from it, and placed either in the fixed capital of the society, or in their stock reserved for immediate consumption. Whatever portion of those consumable goods is not employed in maintaining the former goes all to the latter and makes part of the neat revenue of the society." Smith is doing accountancy here. Not to disparage Smith or accountants, but if a factory owner maintains the roof on his factory or builds a new building, this would be an investment within his fixed capital. The revelation which many people, economists even, may find it hard to believe is that this investment within his fixed capital is paid for out of provisions, materials, and finished work. The finished work his factory produces is sold for money, and part of this money is used to pay for provisions and materials. Provisions might be the electricity and fuel and water his factory requires to run. Materials might be bricks, beams, steel, machinery, in order to construct his factory. The finished work, the sale of it, generates the funds requisite for the provisions and the materials. So the more his finished work is consumed, the more provisions and materials he is able to acquire in order to invest in his fixed capital. But if he doesn't need any more factory machinery at this present time, if his roof is fine and his buildings stand proud, then the revenue obtained by the sale of his finished products, after he has used parts of this revenue to pay for the replenishment of provisions and materials, becomes his profit. And if he doesn't take funds out of this profit to invest in new factories, then this neat revenue is his stock reserved for immediate consumption. He might buy a yacht. He might be the consumer who buys a yacht. So the circulating capital can either, in the process of becoming regenerated, generate some fixed capital, or it can regenerate itself and in the process of doing so create some neat revenue, some stock reserved for the immediate consumption. All of this is the gross revenue of a society of a great country. You might ask, what about the wages the workers of the factory require to be paid? Well, this falls under the category of provisions. He needs to provide the wages for the workers in the same way that he needs to provide the payment to acquire electricity or fuel or water. Of course, he will need materials to work upon if he is in the factory business. He may need metal, he may need wood, he may need cloth. The point Smith is making, and the point I would like to reinforce, is that the circulating capital consists of four parts. 1. Provisions. 2. Materials. 3. Finished work. And 4. Money. As money serves only to circulate the previous three, it must always be deducted from the circulating capital when we consider and when we compute the quantity of industry which the circulating capital of any society can employ. Basically, when we assess how many people shall be employed and where the employment comes from, we should not look at money. We should look at finished goods, we should look at materials, and we should look at provisions. Provisions includes the ability to employ others, and if that is made difficult by the state or made inviable due to hidden factors, then the provision as labour becomes greatly inhibited within a factory setting. Let me again paraphrase the quotation from Smith. But though the whole expense of maintaining the fixed capital is necessarily excluded from neat revenue of a society, we can't say the same thing about circulating capital, because of the four parts which this circulating capital is composed, only provisions, materials, and finished work, it has been observed, are regularly withdrawn from the circulating capital, and if they don't contribute towards infrastructure, they must contribute towards the stock reserved for immediate consumption. Whatever portion of consumable goods is not employed in maintaining the fixed capital, the infrastructure, goes all to the latter, the stock reserved for immediate consumption, and makes a part of the neat revenue of the society. I end my paraphrase. Finished goods, cars, handbags, cutlery sets, or whatever, are bought and consumed. Part of the revenue which is received upon the sale of these things is used to resupply the provisions and materials which were consumed in the production of said items. The surplus revenue, i.e. profit, can be used to maintain existing plant, i.e. to buy better buildings or machinery, or this surplus revenue could be used to buy extra provisions, materials, or finished products to be stored as a tangible asset, i.e. grain stores, or the purchase of Rolex watches to be kept in a bank safe. Either would be an increase of the assets owned by private individuals, and more properly, the latter would be an increase in the neat revenue of that society, which in turn is proportional to the real wealth of that nation. Smith continued, the maintenance of those three parts of the circulating capital, therefore, withdraws no portion of the annual produce from the neat revenue of the society, besides what is necessary for maintaining the fixed capital. i.e., what is not invested as consumable assets, such as houses, Rolex watches, gold ingots, grain stores, is invested in plant machinery, large factories, agricultural infrastructure, machines of transportation, etc. Since the Second World War, in Great Britain, many people have been expecting these things, i.e., heavy industry, which is the maintenance of or investment in fixed capital, to materialize from either business borrowing or governmental spending, but that is not where they originate from. I concur with Smith that heavy industry comes from what wealth is not consumed, either consumed immediately or is consumed at the point of its initial purchase, like that of a house, a store of grain, or a pile of Rolex watches to be stored as an asset to be sold at a later stage. Smith said, in computing either the gross or the neat revenue of any society, we must always, from the whole annual circulation of money and goods, deduct the whole value of the money, of which not a single farthing can ever make any part of either. End quote. Smith has an enhanced perception of truth, which I say is accurate. And this truth contradicts the known wisdom of modern economics today, which calculates the goods as revenue produced within a society as a function of the money which is circulated within the society. The misguided modern economists all call this the gross domestic product, and they are all incorrect. Smith said, "The great wheel of circulation is altogether different from the goods which are circulated by means of it." End quote. Smith tells us the revenue of the society consists altogether in those goods, and not in the wheel which circulates them. End quote. He says, money, therefore, the great wheel of circulation, the great instrument of commerce, like all other instruments of trade, though it makes a part, and a very valuable part, of the capital, makes no part of the revenue of the society to which it belongs. And though the metal pieces of which it is composed, in the course of their annual circulation, distribute to every man the revenue which properly belongs to him, they make themselves no part of that revenue. End quote.